She scrubbed his floors for 10 years. She pressed his shirts. She was invisible to him. And on the morning he lost everything, she was the one who signed the paper that took it all away. This is the story of Margaret Elaine Cole and the lesson she taught one arrogant man that you should never mistake someone's silence for weakness. Margaret grew up in Dayton, Ohio, the daughter of a school teacher and a factory worker. She was not born into money, but she was born into something far more valuable: discipline. At 19, she started working as a domestic housekeeper, cleaning homes for families in her town. She was reliable, she was thorough, and she never ever complained. By her mid-20s, something unexpected happened. Margaret began saving, not just saving, studying every spare dollar she earned. She invested every spare hour she had. She read financial books, banking regulations, investment law, while she mopped floors by day. She was building a different kind of future by night. But here is what nobody around her knew: not her co-workers, not her neighbors, not even her family. Margaret Cole had quietly, methodically accumulated something extraordinary. We will come back to exactly what she had built, but first, you need to meet the man who changed everything. His name was Gerald Ashton, third generation money, a man who had never once in his life had to apologize for anything. Gerald owned a sprawling estate in a suburb outside of Columbus, 6 bedrooms, 4 acres, and a contempt for the people who worked for him that he did not even bother to hide. When Margaret applied to work at the Ashton estate in 2009, Gerald barely looked up from his desk during the interview. He asked her one question, just one: "Can you be invisible?" Margaret paused. She looked at him calmly, and she said, "Yes, I'm very good at that." She got the job now. Let us be very honest about what Margaret walked into Gerald. Ashton was not just difficult, he was cruel. He docked wages for invisible infractions. He made the staff eat standing in the kitchen, as if they did not deserve a chair. He once threw a crystal vase across the room because his coffee was 91 degrees instead of 93, and Margaret, she watched. She said nothing. She cleaned up the broken glass, and she smiled, not because she was afraid, not because she had no options, but because Margaret Cole already knew something Gerald Ashton did not. She knew exactly how this story was going to end. Let us go back now, back to that question you have been holding since the beginning. What had Margaret actually built? In 2003, 6 years before she ever set foot in Gerald's mansion, Margaret had quietly incorporated a community lending institution, not a massive Wall Street bank, something more powerful than that. Local. The federally chartered bank serving mid-sized property owners in central Ohio. She called it Cornerstone Financial Trust. She was the primary shareholder. She was on the board, and for years she had been growing it carefully, quietly, the way she did everything. Now, here is where the story gets interesting, very, very interesting. I want you to pause here for just 1 second and ask yourself something. If you had built something like this, would you have told him? Would you have walked into Gerald's office and made him look you in the eye and see you? Or would you have done exactly what Margaret did? Drop a comment below right now. I genuinely want to know, because what she chose to do next divided people. Some people called it genius. Some people called it cold. I call it earned. By 2017, Gerald Ashton had made some very bad decisions. He had leveraged his estate, heavily chasing a development deal that collapsed. He needed to refinance his mortgage. He needed a bank willing to restructure his debt, and his longtime institution had quietly sold his loan to a smaller regional lender. Gerald did not think much of it. Small banks refinanced big properties all the time. He sent his attorney to handle the paperwork, and one afternoon his attorney called him with a strange question. "The bank wants you to come in person, Gerald. The president of the bank wants to meet you directly." Gerald thought that was odd. Banks send loan officers, not presidents. He almost said no, but his attorney told him, "Just go." So He drove to a modest office building in Columbus. He straightened his tie. He walked into the conference room, and sitting at the head of the table in a charcoal blazer and reading glasses was a woman. He recognized it took him 4 seconds before his brain connected the face to the woman who had pressed his shirts for a decade. Margaret looked at him across that table. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply said, "Good afternoon." "Gerald, I believe we have some paperwork to review." Gerald could not speak. His attorney leaned over and whispered, "She is the president and primary shareholder of this institution. She has been for 14 years. Margaret slid the refinancing documents across the table. The terms were fair. She had made sure of that because Margaret Cole was never about cruelty. She was about clarity." She looked at Gerald, the man who once asked her if she could be invisible, and she said, "I approved your refinancing application. You will keep your home, but I want you to understand something. Gerald, I have sat in this seat making decisions that affected men like you while cleaning your floors, not because I had to, because I chose to, and I need you to think very carefully about every single person whose name you cannot remember." Gerald Ashton signed the documents. He never said a word, and Margaret told me that was the only apology she ever needed. There is a lesson in this story that I think about often, especially in a world that moves so fast and dismisses people so carelessly. Margaret Cole did not need anyone to believe in her. She did not need validation. She did not need Gerald to see her. She needed 10 years, a library card, and the patience of someone who already knew the ending. The people in your life who are quiet, who show up without complaint, who ask for nothing and say even must pay attention to them, because sometimes the most powerful person in any room is the one nobody thought to look at. If this story moved you, if it made you think of someone you know or someone you wish you had treated differently, leave a comment below. Tell me what part of Margaret's story stayed with you. I read every single one, and if you are new here and this is the first Lonja Taylor's story you've watched, hit that subscribe button, because every week we bring you real stories about loyalty, dignity, and the kind of justice that does not make the news but absolutely should. I will see you in the next one.